GitHub. So this is a link. I'll send a link to Prince, and then you post it in the chat. So okay, so let's start. Let's just jump straight into it. So we start with functions. Functions are named blocks of code which are run when the function is called. But then not all functions have names. An example of a function is the hello world function. The print function. An example of the function is the print function. It prints out hello world. It takes in a string and then it outputs the string to the terminal. So the print statement is a function. So we saw an example of a function call when you run the hello world program, if you remember. So that was a function call. You type the name of the function, then you place the arguments in brackets. Yes. And then the definition of a function is very, very simple. The return type, which is optional. The optional return type, the return type of the function. It could be void. So for our main, we saw void as our return type, since our function wasn't going to return anything which our program was going to use. So we use void as our return type. And then the name of the function. So the name of the function could be anything. I advise you to make it descriptive, so that your functions will be self-explanatory just by looking at their names. Yes, and then functions get optional parameters. They could be name parameters or positional parameters. We'll talk more about that later. And then the curly brackets, you get to put your code in there. So an example of a function is the main function, which we've all seen. And then this main function here just prints out hello world to the terminal screen. So you see the basic structure has a return type, the name of the function, then the brackets, which is supposed to hold optional arguments, optional parameters. But then our main doesn't need any arguments, since we're not going to use any of them. And then the block of code that's supposed to run when the function is called. So this is an example of a function. I'll show you more code examples soon. The return types of functions are based on the values they return. There's the return statement, the return keyword, which is used to return values back to wherever a function was called. So the data type of the value the function returns is supposed to be equal to the data type of the value appended to the return statement. Our main has no return statements. That's why it's marked void. So it's returning nothing for us to use later. Yes, and then yes. So I think I'll let me see. Yes, so this is an example of a function. This is our main function, the hello world program we ran the last time. So the return type, the name of the function, and then the block of code that's supposed to run. Then if you remember, this here is a comment. So that's that. So let's talk more about functions. Functions are parameters. So functions can have parameters, and then they are placed in the brackets. The brackets right after the name of the function. Functions the parameters can be either named parameters or positional parameters. Named parameters are parameters which are accessed with their, not necessarily accessed with their names, but then called with their names. So if you are calling a function with a name, I think I'll talk about that later. I need to show you some visuals for you to understand better. But then let's talk about positional arguments now. Positional parameters. They are just parameters in the brackets of the function. So if you are calling a function with positional parameters, you just the arguments are linked to the parameters based on the position they appear in. So an example. There's an example over here. I hope you can all see. You see, we named our function full name and then has some parameters, and then the parameters are supposed to have data types. So the first name has a data type of string, and then that's the position of the first name. So if you are calling the full name function, whatever you want to be used in place of your first name is supposed to be put first. So that's the position of the first name parameter, and then Jerry over here, this function call over here puts Jerry in place of first name, which is based on position. So it links these two based on position, and then string the last name too. And then you can have optional parameters. If it's an optional positional parameter, it's put in square brackets. So an example is this over here. I put this here in square brackets just so you it's not by me, but then from the Dart documentation you're supposed to put optional parameters in square brackets, and then you're supposed to make them nullable, because since they're optional you can choose to include them or not. I'll show you something about yes you can.
So mostly your functions I see parameters and arguments.
Yes.
Someone will be saying arguments, someone will be saying parameters. What are the difference?
So parameters are the ones we specify in the function definition. Those are parameters. But then when you are calling them, the actual values you put in the function call are the arguments. Is it clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
Alright. So I think I'll show you a code example about the optional parameters. So there's an example over here. I have this typed out, so I'll run it for you to see. So you see over here, I defined a function outside the main function, then string full name, just like the one we had over there. And then this is the whole logic of the function. It just returns a string with the first name from here, and then the middle name if there's a middle name, and then the last name. But then the thing is, we don't want our function to return something like first name, then now, then last name. So we check if middle name is there, if it's not now, if it's available, if it's there, if it's not now, and then we print it, and then it returns, and then doesn't print whatever is down here. It doesn't return whatever is down here. So in our functions, when it meets the first return statement, it just ends the execution of the function. It just goes back to wherever the function was called. So this is sort of some implicit statement over here, where if this is not run, then it means the code will not stop here, but then it will keep running and then it will execute this. So if this condition is not met, this will run. You get it, and then it will return. So if you run, say we call our function over here, and then we put just first name and last name. Since they are positional arguments, they are linked based on their position, just as I said. And then so this will be the first name, this will be the last name. See, it doesn't have a middle name, and then it will check, and then the middle name will be now, and then this will be run instead. So we just return Stephen KNUST, the full name. But then over here it will return Larry Kwadwo Page, because middle name was provided, and then this condition over here evaluates to true, evaluates to false, and then evaluates to true, and then this over here is returned. So it prints out Larry Kwadwo Page over here. So I think I'll run this for you to see now. Give me a second. Okay, so if you can see my screen, if the text is big enough, I'm sure you see this. It's the same function we have over there, and then let me if you can remember, I talked about running your code in the terminal and then using the Dart command. So the Dart command plus the function name, the name of the file, which is function, so the positional parameters, and you see it prints Stephen King for just the first line. It doesn't put now there because we checked, and then for the second one it prints Larry Kojo Page. So I'll move on from that now. Let me see. And then there are functions with. Now I'll talk about functions with name parameters. So unlike positional parameters, these are not based on position. They are not reference based on position. They are reference based on their names. So if you define a parameter, you give it a name, and then if you want it to be assigned, you want the value to be assigned to that parameter, an argument to be linked to that parameter based on the name, you make it a name parameter by just putting your parameters in curly braces, just as you see here. There's an example. So you see curly braces and then in here, and then by default named parameters are not required. They are not they are optional. You can choose to add them to your core or not. So if you want them to be required, like to be needed by force, you have to use the required keyword before the data type of the parameter when defining the function. So as you can see over here, I put required in front of the double of the dividend, and then I left the divisor free. So I'll show you how this function, the whole function works, and then you get. So so over here, when you're making a call of a function with named parameters, you have to use the actual name of the parameter, and then you assign it to a value. So over here, I called divided by, and then I assign dividend to 20. We don't use equal to over here. We used the colon to assign it. So I assign this to 20, and then I can make another call. I made another call where I assign dividend to 20 again, and then the divisor to 2. So over here, the divisor is not provided, but then dividend is provided. So let me run that for you to see over here. Okay, so it's the same definition over there, but then here's the logic of the program. So it checks if divisor is not now, because divisor can be now since it's not required. If it's divisor is not now, then the solution is, so a double call solution will be the dividend by divide over the divisor. But then if the divisor is not provided, then this will be run instead. Solution is equal to dividend over 1. So division just divided it by 1. First, we didn't provide any dividend. So we call our function up here, just as the calls in the slides. Then let's run them and see. That function with named parameters. Then as you can see over here, the first print statement just prints out 20 because it's divided by 1, and then the next one prints out 10 because it's divided by 2, just as this logic states. Yes, so that's for named functions with named parameters. Let's move on. So this is the same code I just showed. And then functions can be just a line. There are functions that you just want them to give you just one line. It just has one line, no extra logic, just one line, just a return statement. So maybe you want to do some quick math calculation, and then it's going to be repeated multiple times. Don't just repeat them. You write a function, then it just calculates it. So an example is a cube, and they will talk about it later. But then here's an example of a one-line function. We use the arrow over here, the arrow which is made from the equal to and then the greater than sign, which means return. It's like a shortcut for the return. So this function by a string say hello, then it takes a string name as a parameter, and then it just returns hello, then plus the name of the whatever string you provided as a name. So that's just a sample one to show you. So I'll show you an example very soon in the text editor. And then the anonymous functions too. Anonymous functions don't have names. They are not named. So you just start defining them you start with the brackets, and then you put your parameters in there, followed by your curly brackets with your blocks of code, then your logic. So mostly these functions will be used as parameters for other functions, because it's hard to call a function without a name. How do you call someone without a name? Yes. But then you can also assign the anonymous function to a variable, and then you can call that variable with the parameter with an argument, just as I've done over here. If you can remember from last week, the last time we met, I said the type of this variable here will be implied based on whatever is assigned to. So this will be implied to a function. That will be the type of this variable over here. So let me run the code for this, and then we'll move on. Okay, so one line. So this is the code here. This is our anonymous function up here, if you can see clearly. It's just returning the cube of whatever argument you give it. So if you give it 3, it will return 27. That's the cube. So that's that. So we give it 4, and then 4 cube. I don't know. I'll run the code, and then we'll see 4 cube. And then this is also our one line function. The function just in a line, and then this is our arrow here. I imply the shorthand for the return, which is just returning whatever argument you give it times exponent 3, which is this expression over here. So it's just returning the cube. So let me run this. So if I run this over here, you see 64 prints out this over here first, which is 64, which is the cube of 4, and then 2 and 6, which is the cube of 6. So these work as expected. Yes, so let's move on. This is the code